Did you know that gladiators rarely died in battle? That daylight savings time was originally intended for bug collecting? And that the man who created the Headless Horseman also invented Santa Claus? Learn the truth behind these and much more in my new book, Facts That Aren't True. Link in the description.
Father Casey has a question for us atheists.
You say that you're an atheist, that you don't believe in gods, and I just want to know one thing. Are you a good one? Are you a good atheist?
That really does imply that most of us are not good. We make up a disproportionately small part of the prison population. It's you guys that make up a disproportionately large amount of all child molesters. That's a pretty old video. It's like 5 years old, so I would be pretty late to the party to be reacting to that. So instead, we're going to take a look at this video on ectopic pregnancies and surrogacy.
First, all life is sacred and shares an equal dignity. Because our worth lies not in our usefulness to the world, but in God's grace imparted on us at conception, every human being, from conception to death, deserves respect and protection.
Well, yeah, except why does your book... Why then in your book does God command the killing and direct the killing and do so much of the killing of innocent children? It happens over and over and over again.
For this reason, that in the case of mothers and their unborn children, Pope Pius XII made it clear that there can be no choosing between the two. Never and in no case has the Church taught that the life of the child must be preferred to that of the mother. It is erroneous to put the question with this alternative, either the life of the child or that of the mother. No, neither the life of the mother nor that of the child can be subjected to direct suppression.
This is one of those things where it's almost certainly true that the Church, or the Pope specifically, has never made an edict or a papal bull or anything that specifically says this. But that's not the same thing as have they ever believed in it. It's like heliocentrism versus geocentrism. The Catholic Church never officially accepted heliocentrism until 1822, but the Pope himself never officially declared that geocentrism is true or that heliocentrism is heretical. There were others in the Catholic Church that said that, but the Church itself never did. Now, however, every pope, from its inception all the way up to, we have no idea who the first pope who believed in heliocentrism was, but it would have been certainly up until the 1600s. All of them did believe that the earth is stationary and the sun goes around it. And somehow the Holy Spirit was not able to imbue them with any wisdom as to the contrary. So with respect to this position and the ensoulment of the fetus and legal personhood or whatever, well, Pope Innocent III in 1211 thought that fetuses don't have souls until what's called quickening. And that would be when the fetus is formed. Quickening means alive. So I always thought it was called quicksilver, mercury, because it moves around. It's a liquid, so it's quick. But apparently, quick used to mean alive or living. Fun fact. Now, Pope Innocent III specifically said aborting a non-animated fetus isn't murder. Pope Gregory IX in 1241 said the same thing. Now, we don't know or at least I don't know, what their specific opinion on this position would have been, but the underlying logic behind why it would be wrong in all cases to ever perform any kind of abortion, why it would always be wrong to put the mother's life ahead of the fetus's, the logic of that would lie in their position on that. At least I would think so. Sounds reasonable. Now, I'm not going to put words in their mouth or do any kind of endorsement on them. That would be kind of like an argument from silence. In the late 1500s, Pope Gregory XIV, he reversed a papal bull that Pope Sixtus V, kind of confusing, Sixtus V. What Sixtus had said was that an abortion performed at any point during pregnancy was morally wrong, and it was grounds for excommunication. Pope Gregory XIV, again, he undid that. essentially. Now, from what I understand, Gregory didn't condemn or declare that what Sixtus was saying about the moral position of what's happening is wrong or overturned or anything like that. But we have a lessening of the penalty here. Again, the dogma is that these people are the vicars of Christ on earth. They are guided by the Holy Spirit. The fact that they can't agree on any of this is kind of, that's a little bit eye-opening. I mean, the Catholic Church, they sort of pretend to be logical and progressive in a way, but it's just a tortured ethic that can't keep up with modern times. In more recent history, Pope Pius IX in 1869 condemned all abortions as murder. Now, it's not just popes that can't agree with each other as to whether or not an abortion actually counts as murder. In the eyes of God, killing a fetus at no point is murder. The Bible has a pretty unsophisticated but pretty easy to follow moral logic of eye for eye, tooth for tooth, bruise for bruise, life for life. However, the principle of give life for life is absolutely nowhere given to us by God in his own book with regard to fetuses. If a pregnant woman is forcibly miscarried, then a fine is paid to her husband. Not to her, but to her husband. If the pregnant woman dies, then you do get the death penalty. And this is just copied from the Code of Hammurabi and other Eastern traditions. So again, they're trying to be logical, but like I said, it's tortured logic and it's a tortured ethic. The way that this has had to evolve over time, like with souls. I mean, if you read their position on when does a twin get a soul, it's just a complete mess. Life and ensoulment begins at conception. However, apparently for twins, it doesn't happen until the egg actually splits. So we have delayed ensoulment for twins.
In the one case, as in the other, there can be but one obligation: to make every effort to save the lives of both, of the mother and the child.
Keep this in mind because this will be very relevant later on.
Our ultimate goal must be the protection and well-being of both human beings. Second, never is it justified to intentionally will an evil act to achieve a good outcome. This is explained by the Catechism. A good intention, for example, that of helping one's neighbor, does not make behavior that is intrinsically disordered, such as lying and calumny, good or just. The end does not justify.
This is why Jordan Peterson is flirting with Catholicism, because remember, according to him, you can't lie. So lying to the Gestapo to save Jews is immoral. That's what this is saying. Of course, being Jewish is immoral according to these people. All kinds of non-Christians, especially Jews, were punished and killed for blasphemy. To be fair, the church actually does have a pretty long history of trying to protect Jews. For example, Pope Alexander III, back in the late 1100s, said, quote, "They ought to suffer no prejudice." And then there are many condemnations surrounding forced conversion of them as well. But there's the argument that a system is what it does. And these papal decrees, although I'm sure they had some material good effect in the world, clearly didn't put an end to any of this. And the whole blasphemy thing, that was absolutely never downplayed. And it was always preached that these people are going to go to hell. The most dramatic change with regard to the blasphemy, because being Jewish is blasphemous, right? Well, that was always the position, but they changed that after the Second Vatican Council in the 60s. And that was, they softened what counts as blasphemy, specifically to protect Jews, I'm pretty sure, as a response to the horrors of the Holocaust. But yeah, the only reason the Catholic Church has any flexibility is because we make progress outside of religion, and then they just copy our homework.
In an ectopic pregnancy, a fertilized egg implants outside of the uterus, usually in one of the fallopian tubes. Because a child cannot come to term in this state, it is considered an unviable pregnancy, but because it will continue to grow until the fallopian tube ruptures, it must be removed to prevent the death of the mother. What do? Directly aborting the child, whether through dismemberment or a drug like methotrexate, would save the mother, but would do so through an evil act. What is willed is the death of a child, which can never be allowed. A salpinectomy, on the other hand, the surgical removal of the fallopian tube, is quite different. What is willed is the removal of a near-ruptured body part, a good action. The death of the child is an unintended consequence of this action, and if it were possible, the child could be reimplanted into the womb. For now,
So abortion is wrong, but indirect abortion is fine. And keep in mind, this is why I told you to remember that thing from earlier. This procedure is not intended to save the life of the fetus. So I think Pope Pius XII would like to have a word with you, young man. So you know what's crazy about this? If we just make abortion pills like mifepristone, I think that's what it's called. If we make that blue raspberry flavored, then women take the pill because they like the taste, and abortion is just a consequence of it.
what is being willed is the treatment of cancer, not the death of the child. This is the case even with uterine or cervical cancers, situations in which the uterus must be removed to save the life of the mother. Even though it will undoubtedly result in the death of the child, the Church allows it because what is being willed is not a direct abortion, but the removal of a pathology.
So what you just said there is abortion is healthcare. Let's logically extend that. Nobody is ever more healthy when they are pregnant. Every abortion can be said to be the intent of the increase of the life expectancy of the mother, and the abortion is just a consequence. All right, on to surrogacy.
Is there any moral justification for surrogacy? No. This is literally never justified. I understand that some will see it as a good, that it allows families to have children who otherwise would never have been able to do so, but it really is one of the more unnatural aspects of our culture. Not only does it separate procreation from the sexual act, making it invalid, it includes a third party into the union, a grave offense, and treats that third party as nothing more than a body, a carrier. This is highly, highly problematic.
Important quote to keep in mind from that is, surrogacy separates the act of sex from procreation, therefore it's invalid. So this person stitched his video and he pointed out, or he claimed that Mary was a surrogate. Now, that doesn't work because a surrogate mother does not become then the mother. She doesn't raise the child. She's not the child's, she's its biological mother, but she's not its mother. So Mary technically wasn't a surrogate. We have to grant them that. But then this creator points out what he said. If it's wrong because it separates the act of sex from procreation, then Jesus's miraculous conception is invalid.
Procreation without the actual sexual act is invalid. Then how do you explain the Virgin Mary? Like, hello, do you hear yourself?
I said that separating a sexual act from procreation is immoral, meaning that there is a sexual act somewhere, it's just removed from the act of procreation.
There was procreation without sex in the conception of Jesus. So it's invalid, according to you.
This is not my opinion. This is just basic boilerplate Catholic moral theology when it comes to sexual activity. The Church teaches that there are two natural ends to sex, procreation and the unity between the couple, and that both have to be willed for a sexual act to be moral. They don't necessarily have to be achieved. Obviously, it won't happen in every single case, but they have to be willed or at least have an openness to those two. Any act that actively wills something different or avoids one of these two is immoral.
Well, that's exactly what happened. There was conception without sex. There is no valid form of this argument. I don't know what he's possibly trying to do. Your only choice is to say it's not wrong because God isn't subject to human morality.
Any act that actively wills something different or avoids one of these two is immoral.
Right. So procreation that avoids any of those acts is immoral. That's what we have here. In the conjugal act, it is not licit to separate artificially the unitive meaning from the procreative meaning, because the one, as well as the other, belong to the innermost truth of the conjugal act. The one is realized together with the other, and, in a certain way, the one through the other. You can kind of read that as sex without procreation is wrong, but procreation without sex isn't wrong, but it really kind of explicitly says that they are intrinsically linked together. The one is realized together with the other, and the one through the other. Somebody else points out the obvious fact that Mary didn't consent to this, and this is his response.
And as for doing this without her consent, which came up dozens of times, we can literally read it in the Bible. Mary said, "Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord. May it be done to me according to your word."
How
She gave her consent. So,
Okay, yeah, I wanted to make sure he said it. So, how can you put these words up and then say she gave her consent? I am the handmaid of the Lord. May it be done according to your word. Accepting something that somebody says they're going to do to you isn't consent. It can be. This is not that. The best part of this to me is to ask the question, what if she said no? She was the only person who ever lived in history that could have been Jesus's mother. If she would have said no, God would have had to have hardened her heart or something else to force this upon her. Accepting what a outside party says they're going to do to you is not consent. Somebody then asks him, well, what about pacemakers and all these other artificial things? Because again, with IVF, surrogacy, lots of these things involve subverting the act of sex.
the point we want to make here is that the introduction of artificial means is not necessarily a bad thing. When it aids and assists in the natural function of human life as created by God and allows the person to do what they normally would not be able to do, this is a good thing.
That's what surrogacy is. That's just 100% what it is.
Wait until they invent artificial wombs. You Catholics are going to get upset. Maybe, but maybe not. It really depends on how it works. Depending on how it worked, an artificial womb might actually be allowed by the church, as it could serve, in some cases, as just a more developed incubator.
But incubation separates the fetus from the uterus. Therefore, it's invalid. I think this was in the earlier video, but he talks about forcing an induced labor. According to Catholic practice, that's totally fine because the fetus is viable and it can survive. But you're separating it from the uterus, which is the natural function and purpose created by God, in your opinion, so it's invalid. I got a phone call while making this video right at this point, and it caused me to lose my train of thought, but also skip over an important part of the video. So Father Casey, used invalid to describe the disconnect between procreation and sex. I'm saying, but it's invalid, as if he used that term to say breaking what God naturally set up is invalid. But that's not what he said. That's not what he said the invalidity comes from. So me calling back to that, but it's invalid thing, that itself is sort of invalid. That's not the point I meant to refer to. Right after he says this part about technology that helps the body do what it naturally does is not wrong, he then says, this is why surrogacy as we have it now is wrong. No, surrogacy as we have it is technology that helps people become parents. So any other technology like artificial wombs or anything like that, that accomplishes the same end goal that surrogacy does, is if he's saying that surrogacy doesn't count and that it's wrong, then I don't see why those things are not also wrong. That's what I see as the real contradiction. Back to the video. Another example of how the ethic and the logic is just so obviously tortured. The church always taught that sex without the intent of procreation is always wrong. And then what happened is we learned about ovulation. And now the official position is, okay, well, you can have sex whenever you want, as long as you're not against becoming pregnant. No, we know when the infertility periods are, and we know that there's a 0% chance you get pregnant if you have sex during then. So it's morally wrong. Except the church now says, well, it's fine.
But I think it's pretty clearly different. In surrogacy, a woman holds onto and nurtures something that does not belong to her, at great risk to herself, before turning it back over to someone else.
So surrogacy is wrong because of the great health risk it poses for the mother. But abortion is always wrong. Overall, he seems like he might be one of the good ones. He just believes in stupid things. Thanks for watching.